Welcome to Jazz Zone Together. We're honored today to be joined by one of our nation's leading jazz educators, Jeff Jarvis. Jeff currently serves as Director of Jazz Studies at the Bob Cole Conservatory of Music at Cal State University, Long Beach. His illustrious career also includes roles as a music publisher, composer, trumpet player, and recording artist. At this point, I'll turn the mic over to Dick Dunscomb to conduct the interview. Dick, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. Wow, what a pleasure today to welcome my friend, Jeff Jarvis. Great to see you, man.
Oh, great to see you too, Dick. I'm just thrilled to be here, and it was actually kind of scary hearing Bob introduce me, because with all those things that I did, it sounds like I can't hold down a job.
Oh, we'll get into that. This guy is amazing, as you all are about to find out. So we like to start the interviews with talking about your early days. What led you on the path toward music and music education, beginning with your early years?
Yeah, it was it was kind of, I don't want to say predestined, but it was environmental. Both of my parents were music teachers. My father is a band director, and my mother was a vocal music educator, and my little sisters, who are both retired now, both became vocal music educators. And so it was in our house. We woke up every morning hearing music on the stereo. That's back when people had stereos. And my mom would be playing the high-lows, the Forerunner to Singers Unlimited, and my dad would be playing bassy records. And so it was a sound that I was so familiar with that I never recall not knowing how to swing, for instance. I have to struggle to teach students how to get a nice, comfortable swing style, and I just heard it so much, it was imitation for me. My dad was a trumpet player, so I couldn't remember a time that I didn't want to play trumpet. Although most of the stuff I was doing was more classically oriented at the time. I didn't start playing any jazz until I was in high school. But my dad was teaching me in the trumpet Bible, the Arbon's book, and so I'm what they call an Arbon cowboy. I played a lot out of that book, and I think I tell students often that everything I learned about jazz I learned in the Arbon's book, because he really drilled me on scales, arpeggios, and so when I heard a chord, I had a feeling of what to do with it, because of the fact that I'd heard those sounds. It was very organic. I wasn't a real theory head as far as, learning to improvise when I eventually got into it. But let's see, early years, I did the usual elementary, junior high, and high school programs. Took some private lessons, not a lot. I didn't take any private lessons till I got into high school, because I was taking lessons with my dad. And eventually, and it was kind of fortuitous the way it worked out. I was not a model student in high school. I was often skipping classes and going down to the band room to practice. So my grades were lacking, to say the least. And I was playing in an American Legion band at the time, and one of the clarinet players, I was talking to him about my grades, and I really did want to get into college to learn music. And he said, "Hey, I got the perfect solution for you." And what he suggested to me was to audition for Valley Forge Military Academy near Philadelphia. And so I won a full scholarship there, and it was a life-changing experience for me, both musically and in maturity too. Learning how to adapt to a more disciplined lifestyle. My grades improved, and musically although we didn't get to take any private lessons, we were playing all day long. And I was a trumpet player, so I had to do a lot of bugling for the post for the whole Corps of Cadets. And we had opportunities to play we played for Nixon at the White House. We played for his inaugural parade. We played for a lot of governors and other dignitaries. So my formative years as a musician, from all the way from when I started, I think it was the summer after my third grade year, until I got out of high school, where it was just filled with the environment. And it's an environment that I feel very fortunate now, as I see students that are becoming good musicians that didn't have nearly that much music in their environment, and they're still making it happen. So I feel very, very fortunate in that regard.
That's good. You have so many paths that we want to talk about today. So let me start with your involvement in the music publishing world. I know that your family's been involved with that for many years with Kendor. Can you share some of your fondest memories of those
Sure,
years?
sure. One of the fondest, I'll have to say, I'll tell you how I got into the business in a minute, but my fondest memory is the fact that I got to meet a ton of people out on the convention trail because we did 7 or 8 conventions a year when I was in publishing. And that's how I got to meet you and to meet Bob. And, it just opened up a lot of doors as far as stuff that I wanted to do outside of publishing. So, and it was also for my environment and from being in publishing that I always felt like, even though I wasn't a teacher, I was connected with music education and jazz education at some level. So, as far as getting involved with the company, after I got out of school, I was still in Philadelphia, and I started playing sessions in Philly and playing with bands at the Jersey Shore and so forth. And I eventually, I mean, we can talk about that in a minute, but I eventually moved just on a fluke. I moved out to Denver, Colorado. And while I was out there, I was freelancing for 2 or 3 years. And all of a sudden, I realized I was starting to get into my 30s. I was 31, 32, and I was starting to realize, as many musicians do, how am I going to be sustainable with this? How am I going to be able to afford, health insurance and all this other stuff? And I decided, as a freelance musician, there just wasn't enough of a safety net for me as I wanted, because I had, in my 20s, I didn't worry about that because I think around that time we never worry about much of anything. So I was starting to realize, oh, holy cow, I got to support myself here. So what I did was, I thought, with the military training that I had from military school, that I'd enlist and be a musician in the military. And there was an opening that came up in the U.S. Air Force Falconers down at Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy, and I auditioned for it, and I won the audition. And the day after I told them, and I hadn't done anything legally yet to enlist, but the day after they told me, my stepfather called me, and he was a partner in Kendor, and his sales guy had retired, and his editor was leaving the company. And he said he was going to bring his son up from Columbia Pictures Music to in Florida to do the sales. And he said, "Would you be interested in becoming the editor?" And of course, as many opportunities I've had in my life, I had no idea what I was getting into. But I said, yes, I'll do it. I mean, it's the same way I started writing. Somebody said, "Hey, can you write a chart for this?" And I go, "Sure, I can." And then I had to learn how. So it's kind of like sticking my neck out on the chopping block. But I decided, you know what, this would be the same sort of stability that I would have gotten in the Air Force, being a part of a company and having benefits and so forth. So I told him I'd do it. I moved out, and I just hit the ground running. It was pretty scary. I mean, I was thinking, the first time the phone rang and somebody that I regarded as a famous writer was Don Sebesky. I was actually nervous talking to him. That went away quickly, because once I developed a working relationship with people, it was easier, to talk to people like Thad Jones and to John LaBarbera and younger writers like Matt Harris. I say younger because he was still in college and he was already published. And Sammy Nestico, I mean, a compositional god in our field. And and I also wanted to, they had a lot of great writers. I wanted to put my own fingerprint on things, and I started not so much actively looking for writers, because so many people back in the day, they didn't have the technology that they have now where you can self-publish easily. So everybody and their brother was sending us music. And I mean, literally, when I got there and I walked into my office for the first time, there was an entire box of music that was sitting in the corner. And I asked the assistant editor, I said, "What is this?" He said, "Some guy, Bob Mincer, sent it in. It's been here for about a month." And I said, "Really? And nobody's looked at it?" And he says, "Well, I guess not." And so I just started listening to this stuff, and he had included about 20 charts. And I called him up and I said, "Bob, I just took this job at Kendor, and I just saw your stuff here, and I'd like to develop a publishing relationship with you." And he says, "Well, which one do you want?" And I said, "All 20." So we started incrementally getting him into the catalog, and soon after that, we started publishing John Fedchock, and then he said, "Can you do me a favor, Jeff, and publish my wife, Maria Schneider?" And I'm thinking, at the time, she was a little known writer. She was fresh out of Eastman, but she had come up with that pedigree from, Gary Lindsay in Miami to Rayburn Wright at Eastman, and wonderful writer. And she was and very soon after that's where she started to really, build a head of steam as a writer. And, she was fresh in her mind, was all that great stuff that she learned from being Gil Evans' copyist. I mean, so I got to be honest, creatively, I was in heaven, even though it was hard work. I was getting to look at these charts every single day, and I was interested in, I was already published by Kendor. I had a couple of charts with him, and learning how these people wrote, and it was seeping into my writing. And it was, I tell my students, I had an arranging class last night, and I just said, I was lucky enough to have experiences that none of you will probably ever have. I said, once a week you have to do a little bit of score study and tell us about the chart you studied. I got to do this for a living for 25 years, so I was, again, very, very fortunate. So things moved along. A few years later, Craig Cornwall, my stepbrother and partner in the business, my stepfather retired, and Craig and I bought the company. So I was there from 1985 to 2005. 2005 is when I came here, and I noticed there was going to be some. I think I was seeing the handwriting on the wall, because publishing became very different because of the advent of new technology, and every publishing company that's still there had to reinvent themselves in some way or another. So I stayed with Kendor and but I was asked to apply for a position here, and I just thought, well, now after I've been doing all these clinics for Yamaha and doing all this stuff, I can be a real teacher. And I always saw that no matter how many great experiences I had as a writer and player, I always saw that as being a noble calling, and I really wanted to do it, and did. And I'm not going to say it wasn't without a learning curve, because as both of you know, things move a lot quicker in the corporate world than they do in the academic world. You can hire somebody on Monday and fire them on Tuesday. In this world, it takes 2 years to hire them and 6 years to get rid of them. So it's a whole bunch different. And then having all the things that people like us, we're creative people and business people, but there's so much minutiae, that's that you have to get used to dealing with. So, but I've loved it. It's been a great ride, teaching wise. But I'd have to say, like I said, my fondest memories in the publishing industry of just being able to meet great people, and having the opportunity to feel like, yes, I was a businessman. Yes, I was supposed to be worrying about the bottom line. But in my heart of hearts, I felt like I had a responsibility to provide quality music that would serve music education, not just make a buck. So, and that would be kind of my altruistic reason for how I approach my job at Kendor.
Well, let me say on behalf of myself and all of the jazz educators out there in the world, Kendor has been incredible. All of the people that you mentioned, the charts have been just invaluable to jazz education. And you failed to mention the one guy who's really hot on the trail now. That's you. Your charts are amazing. So, yeah, thank you for all of that. Now, I know that as a trumpeter, you played many different places and with many different artists. Can you tell us some of those stories about performing?
Sure. Well, I mean, I didn't have the experiences for a long time that many people do that are, nothing but a professional musician, because soon into my professional career, I was starting to divide my time between writing and playing. like one of the best things that happened for me after I moved to Philadelphia and I started playing with some cover bands was I was asked to do a couple of recording sessions for two producers named Gamble and Huff, and they were responsible for the disco era in Philly. And so, again, kind of like when I took the job at Kendor, we came in for a session. There was 5 horn players there, and the guy that was supposed to have written the charts wasn't there with the charts, and the producers were also the songwriters. So they had an idea what they wanted to hear as far as the horn lines. And they said, can anybody here, if we sing the parts, can you write it down for the other players? And all, the other 4 guys had done arrangements before, and the only thing I'd ever done was, lifted horn parts off of records for rock bands, and I raised my hand and said, I'll do it, and I'm thinking, God, I hope I don't crash and burn here. And so they set me into a room for about an hour, and I jotted down the parts. We played it, and it was a session for the OJs. And it wound up doing pretty well as a tune called Money, Money, Money. And so and it was very simple horn parts, but I'd played a few of their sessions. I knew the sound that they liked. And so after that, they started giving me cassette tapes and say, here, take this home and write some horn parts. And here, we're doing a stylistics tune. And I'd like that to open with an English horn solo. You know how to write for English horn? Oh, yeah, of course I do. And then I rushed home to find out what key an English horn's in. And then they asked me to do string parts. And I know this sounds like ridiculous. I didn't even know what key a violin was in, I've since learned, since I had to do a lot of pops charts and now. But anyway, so I was getting an education and getting paid for it. I was doing horn parts and playing on records for Teddy Pendergrass, the OJs, the Jacksons. They did a project there. Melba Moore. There's a bunch of people that were on that label. So I was very, very fortunate. I got a baptism by fire, if you will, as a writer. As far as live performances and tours, I only toured when I was in my 20s. I toured twice, and in my 30s once, as far as doing an extended tour. I did, a lot of runouts where a band would go out for a weekend and play somewhere. But I got to work with Van Morrison when I was about 23. And I took a little time off from the record company and went out for about 6 weeks. And that was an education for me because I had never played in, big venues like, we played at Shea Stadium, and of course, back in those days, you didn't have all the cool electronics like the in-ear monitors that my wife gets to use on her tours. We were listening to monitors that were on the floor that you couldn't hear because people are screaming in the stadium. And my chops were shot at the end of 2 nights, and the trombone player, I was complaining to him. He says, come here, I want to show you something. And he took me into the hotel room, and he said, get out your horn and play a tuning note. Play it at mezzo forte. Remember what that feels like. Now play it at forte. Remember what that feels like. And he said, now do that with all the notes, and remember how it feels on your chops to play, because when you go up on stage tomorrow night, you're not going to hear any of it, but you're going to remember what it felt like. And you're not going to overextend, and then you'll have some face left to get through the gig. And so everything. I was just a baby. I was like an infant, where these guys had road chops. So I learned a lot on that tour. I got to tour with Gladys Knight for a little while, and that was a lot of fun. She's a very classy lady, and there was a lot of fun, good people, good crew. And then I didn't do any touring for about maybe 10 years. And I got a chance to go out with a group that was getting really big on MTV in the 80s called Duran Duran. And they had done an album called Notorious, and it had horns on it. And, of course, this was to have music that was on MTV with horns. This was great. And so I got to do a tour with them. And I think my most memorable experience was just realizing how different these people were when they were on the stage and when they were traveling. Because I had seen these guys on TV, on MTV, and I saw the spiked hair, the mullet haircuts, and the bleach blonde hair, and the wild clothes, and I just thought that's what these guys were like all the time. And then my second day on the tour, the lead singer Simon Le Bon was on a phone. This is back when they had payphones, on a payphone at the airport, talking to his broker in London, and his hair was combed down, and he was wearing a cardigan sweater, And I thought, this is a little different from what I imagined, So I think that was probably one of the biggest epiphanies about, the stars on tour was the fact that when they walk up on stage, most of them are in a costume, and it was like it's like Halloween only with music, you know. And so I'd say that was you know one of the most fun things I can think about as far as touring, or at least one that I can talk about in mixed company. No, there was it really these people were about business. There was no wild parties. There wasn't it would They were about doing a good job, getting their sleep. They'd have some fun. We had fun doing that, but I was just surprised to find out what a business it was, because I just thought it was this carefree fun time on the road, and it was work, and but it's memories that I'll never ever forget.
So you packed up all that training, all that writing skills, all that education that you had behind you, and got into your passion. So now you've been on the faculty at Cal State Long Beach for a number of years, and you've made that program so well known, Jeff, throughout the world. Share with us some of the details of the program and what we might expect to see going forward.
Wow. Well, I was very lucky because for two reasons. Becoming a college educator when you're 53 years old and being a rookie was pretty scary, because my sisters were retiring at that age, and I was just getting started. So, and I often thought that with my dad being a band director and listening to him come home talking about, the frustrations of dealing with his principal or what have you, and if he was alive at the time that I became a band director, and I called him up and said, "Dad, I'm a band director now," he would have said, "What were you thinking? Are you crazy?" You know. But I hope he's up there looking down, and being proud, because I really patterned what I do after him. Although I'm not the same temperament as he was, he was more patient. I'm a little bit more intense in rehearsals than he was. But I love knowing that I've made a difference, and I think that was the thing that he always thought that he was a band director because he had to be. What happened, he was on the road with Harry James. My mom got pregnant with me. He comes off the road, uses his education to become a director, and now all of a sudden that playing career was cut short. And I always wondered if he felt trapped in that job or if he really liked it. And I think he really did like it, because he realized he was making a way bigger impact as a teacher than he ever could have as a third trumpet player in Harry James' band. So as far as my outlook, when I got here, like I said, it was a learning curve. But the program was started by a guy named John Prince. He
Mm.
was a high school band director in Bellflower, near Long Beach, and he took the job here, and he started a jazz studies program here, and it was the first one in the United States, not the United States, in California, the first college to have a jazz degree. And he just did a bang up job. He had great students. I mean, if I go once a month down to a place nearby here and hear the Tom Kubis band play, it's basically John Prince's band that got older. It was his first band was Tom Kubis and Stan Martin and Andy Martin and all these incredible players. Jay Anderson, John Patitucci was in the band. And there's just some great players that came through this program when John was there. He was there for quite some time here, and then his health started failing. He had lupus, and he had some health issues that really made it difficult for him to be at school every day. I mean, he was missing, a couple of days a week sometimes, and finally he had to retire because he couldn't physically do the job. But he had done so much and put so many great musicians out into the workplace. He was doing charts for Doc Severinsen's band and the Tonight Show. He was just a great director. But the program declined a bit when he got sick. And then they hired somebody else, I think for 1 year while they were doing a search. Buddy Collette came in and ran the program. And he was he was just there temporarily, and then another guy took the job and was here for about 6 years. And I think he wasn't tenured, and then they did another search, and I was hired. So it had a good 10 years to decline. The program just really fell on hard times. So I had the blessing of taking over a program that was well known because of John Prince, but I didn't have big shoes to fill when I got here, and I could really just do it my way and not have to do it. The hardest thing to do is to take a job at any school at any level after the kids are all used to the band director from last year, and Mr. D didn't do it that way. Okay, and that happens even at the college level. Well, I was taking over a struggling program it was a clean slate. So I was just on a tear for the first year or two to put us on the map and go to a lot of festivals and do as many off-campus performances as we could, do recordings. And fortunately, things have worked out quite well. We've had a long history of good bands now. COVID has kicked us in the butt like it did with everybody. And now we're back in a rebuilding type of a situation. My bands sound fine, but the problem is I don't have the depth I used to have. I used to have 65, 70 jazz majors, and we've got 40 because a lot of students after high school just decided not to go to college for music. And some not at all. They just took, a gap year or whatever. So I think now we've got a lot more people coming in next year, and it's going to build up and build up. So, it's not struggling, but it's just not as, I don't have like 5 or 6 piano players. I have 2, it's just numbers. And, just to make sure that I wasn't thinking it was all me, I've kept in very close touch with my colleagues. Fortunately, I've got my friend Bob Mincer close by at USC, and I would call him and we would spend an hour on the phone, complaining about what we're going through and how are we going to get through these Zoom meetings. And so I've had a lot of those conversations, and I found out that, it doesn't matter how big or small the school, everybody's struggling. Everybody's struggling at the secondary school level, at the university level, and we just got to get our nose to the grindstone and get things back on track after having 2 years of hampered progress, if you will.
Well, congratulations on the work you've done with the program. It's really been very, very impressive. And just on a personal note, I met John the first NAJE convention I went to. I sat down next to him in the concert. And from that day forward, I was like mesmerized with this guy. Yeah. He was magic. And now they got another magic man there. So good for you, Jeff.
Well, now, continuing on the John Prince thing, his wife will be on stage with us on the 24th because she presents a cash award and a trophy or a plaque to a leading jazz student here every year. We haven't done it for 2 years because of COVID, but it's called the John Prince Memorial Award. So I get to select a top student, and she comes on stage to present it. And it's so good that, she's made me feel very good about what we've been able to accomplish, in John's name.
That's terrific. So can we talk for a minute about your jazz publications, your writing? You've written so much, and talk about the most successful of those in your mind, and how did it come about, and how is it working today?
Yeah, well, it's definitely changed. I will say that. I mean, there was a time when Kendor was putting out 50 new jazz charts a year, and as things progressed, they were putting out less and less. And of course, during COVID, I mean, people went on some publishers, including Kendor, went on a moratorium. I've got, I think, 3 charts with them right now that have been sitting there for a couple of years. I've had over the years about 200 big band charts published, and done a lot of writing for other private interests. Do Pop's orchestra stuff and big band chart commissions and commissions, some of which I can publish. Some are a little bit too hard. If I do like one for a military band or what have you. I mean, there's a couple of 3 or 4 charts that I wrote in the early 90s that are still in the catalog and doing well. There's one called Critical Mass, another one called Honk. For some reason, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it was just my background with the disco years, but even though I was, a middle-aged white guy, I was writing a lot of funk charts. And now a senior citizen writing funk charts. But I would say that the shelf life for publications used to be really long. When I first got to Kendor, I mean, there was charts that had been in the catalog for 20, 25 years. Now all of a sudden, I think the competitive jazz festivals kind of changed that for a lot of publishers because everybody was looking for what they call festival charts, and they were more sensationalistic, and there wasn't so much. People were getting into the same thing in jazz education as what's happened to recordings since they stopped doing albums. People used to do an album, and it was a journey through the music from start to finish, and that's what the programs were like. That's what the music was like that we published. And now everybody wanted, something that was going to win that festival. And so what happened was, it's still a lot of good charts have come out during that time, but they don't have the shelf life that they used to have. I found that things went in and out of print faster, and I talked to other people in publishing even after I left publishing, and it was kind of similar for them. So the ones with the publications with the biggest staying power would be books and collections. So I concentrated on doing a lot of those, writing solo, duet, and ensemble collections, some with backing tracks, and they've done quite well. The books I've done pretty well. I did a thing called the Chord Voicing Handbook with Matt Harris, and with Doug Beach, the Jazz Educator's Handbook, a pedagogy book that's it's due for reprint pretty soon. So I'm taking a sabbatical next semester to do a rewrite on it with Doug Beach. We'll do a second edition. And so it feels weird to, I'm preparing, people to take over certain courses and bands, and it's so scary to walk away from this program, even for a semester. I mean, I've been eligible 3 times for sabbaticals, and I just couldn't bear to take one. I didn't. But now there's a really good reason to, and I figure I better do it before I retire, to take at least one sabbatical and get this book in shape. But yeah, it's a pretty scary thought. I mean, if I was teaching an academic course, I might feel a little different. But it's weird to spend 17 years building a program and then walking away from it for a semester. It's going to feel like an eternity. I know, even though I'll be busy on the book, it's going to seem like a long time. So, but anyways, looking forward to the program. Just like I said, we just want to continue to rebuild from COVID, as everybody is. I don't want to blame everything on COVID. It was just a really long pause that I'm happy to be getting out of, and we've just been informed that our concerts we had to do with masks on, and this concert I'm doing on the 24th will be the first one where we don't have to do that. As far as what I'm trying to leave my students with, since I live in Los Angeles, in the LA area, I have a chance to see what's going on in the entertainment industry here and know what is demanded of musicians. And so I guess my biggest guiding factor in how I do my job is that I don't want to graduate a bunch of jazz scientists. I want to graduate people that play music and feed their families. And so I take a very pragmatic approach to it. There's a lot of accountability in my program as far as punctuality and dependability. And the most important thing is that I want them to learn, especially in jazz, to think for themselves. So I'm very careful to show them how to play, but not tell them what to play.
Well, whatever you're on to, man, keep it up because it's really working. We've been kind of parallel in our involvement with NAJE, IAJE, and now GIN. Talk a little bit about how important organizations like that are today for younger musicians and jazz educators and performers.
I think they're critically important. I mean, and you know this from doing the reading sessions at the Midwest, how many band directors are sitting out there with a pad and paper writing down titles of charts that they want to buy for their band. I mean, these are huge in-service events that leave band directors with incredible incentives to further their programs and develop, because for many people, they weren't jazz people, and now they're leading a jazz band, in secondary schools, and oftentimes they have a feeling like gosh, I don't belong here. I don't know this kind of music that well, and all of a sudden I'm standing in front of a big band, and my closest jazz experience was playing bassoon in the Firebird Suite. So I think that I think it allows people to see that they're a lot more qualified than they thought. When they go to enough clinics and workshops, they start to see, hey, wait a minute, the stuff that Jeff's talking about in this clinic sounds like the same stuff I do with my concert band. He's talking about intonation, attacks, releases, nuance, line dominance, shaping phrases. And every once in a while, there's a jazz specific thing that I'll say to my band. So if a guy is a confident concert band director, he is way more qualified, he or she is way more qualified to be a jazz band director than they think. So going to these events like NAJ and IAJ and now Gen, I wasn't even a band director, and I was going to every clinic I could find, because I just was so hungry to learn about this, even though I wasn't a director. But I was learning about my art. I was learning about how to play it, how to teach it, so I could become a better clinician. I went to a lot of rhythm section clinics because I didn't know enough about those instruments, and those are the people I needed to talk to the most in a big band. And then I had some people that helped me along the way. I think the first one I realized, as far as getting me into those organizations, was he was president of NAJ at the time, or IAJ. It was Bob Curnow, and Bob had he had seen me do a clinic, and he said, you know what, you ought to run for the board. He says, I'm not going to be in president for much longer, but you ought to run for the board. And I said, well, okay, another new challenge. And so I ran for treasurer, since I had some business background, and I thought that's where I could do my best work for them, make a best contribution. And eventually I ran for vice president, served a couple terms in that position. And now I'm active with our state organization. Right now I'm the higher education rep, but I served as president, and I served in my favorite position was the one called past president. As you all know, it's a lot of work. But I think all of these organizations, they have so much to offer an experienced or an inexperienced director. Even for the experienced director, this person gets to go to the conventions, see other bands play, compare his program to their programs, take in some clinics, and even if they know, quote unquote, what they're doing, it reinforces whether they're doing it right or wrong, and it gives them better tools with which to work. So I think they're tremendously important to our jazz education world.
Well, I sure agree with that. Well, look, man, before we let you go, would you play something for us?
Oh, gosh. Well, I just happen to have a trumpet here. I leave one in my office, but there's a lot of people close by in the office, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna use a mute. So it'll probably sound better over Zoom anyway, but let's see.
All right, man. That's still there.
That's the only solo I still had memorized from all the ones I've written out for myself.
So. Well, Jeff, this has been fabulous. It's just a pleasure to be with you again and to have you share all this wonderful information with our viewers. So thank you so much for coming on, and just keep at it, man. You're doing a wonderful job.
Bless your heart, Dick. And Bob, thank you so much for this opportunity for me to be on Jazz Zone together. This has been a lot of fun, taking a walk down memory lane, and hopefully some people that are listening to it get a renewed sense of vigor for the work that they do.
Jeff, thank you. Great information, and it's nice to get a chance to see you and get up to date on what all you've accomplished and where you're going. To our viewers, thanks for joining us for this episode of Jazz Zone Together. Please check out our entire library of interviews. We know you'll find them of real value. Watch for updates as we're adding new interviews regularly.